Hello, welcome and good evening. This is Pastor Lane Nelson at Eastside Lutheran Church. I am so glad to be with you again. It is Tuesday night. We are back in the bothy, as they say, getting ready to delve into some conversations of faith, as is our custom on these Tuesday nights. I tell you, it is Tuesday, and just like clockwork, we have another beautiful evening here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Hopefully, you are finding things just as pleasing wherever it is that you might be. If you are out there and you are participating in this conversation live with me, please feel free to jot down in the comments that you're here, say hello, throw out a question or a shout out or anything like that that you might have, that we can be in dialogue with one another as we have these conversations. Again, it is just a wonderful evening here. Hello to Miss Colleen. You are always one of the first to jump in. It makes my heart glad. Hope you are doing well. Hope that everything is good at home and that you are enjoying good spirits also. We are gathered here, and there has been much going on at Eastside Lutheran as we start this new year, 2021, as we find ourselves in January. Nice to be back again in more of our usual setting for these conversations. But the big news here, of course, at Eastside is that we have welcomed a new associate pastor. Pastor Joel Pakin has started as of January 1st, so it is wonderful to have another clergy person on staff. He is in the process of getting himself moved and settled here into Sioux Falls. He and his wife Amy, who is also a pastor, and she will be serving at Brandon Lutheran Church just outside of Sioux Falls. So as we start this new year, I invite you to keep them in your prayers as well. They will be having an ordination coming up on Saturday afternoon at, I think, 2 o'clock. For those of you on the Eastside Lutheran email list, you will be getting a link so that you can participate live in that as well. So keep an eye on your email as we get later into the week for that. But in the meantime, please keep both Joel and Amy in your prayers as they get ready for this wonderful milestone in their life. This mark of ordination as God calls them into a new way of living out their vocation. Couple of quick shout outs. I see that Judy is here. Nancy and Judy, all the way from Arizona. Nice to have you here. Mary Jo, how are you? Dick, how are you? I'm guessing Cheryl might be with you as well. Connie, oh my goodness, Connie is here in Houston, is good. Missed having conversation with you, Connie, but so glad to see your name here with us tonight. Hello also to Carol. Hello to Renee up in Bottineau, and to Colin and Harriet also. What a great community. I have really come to appreciate this group of people who gathers on these Tuesday nights, or whenever it is that you watch, later on YouTube or later on Facebook. It's nice to know that even though we might be separated for all kinds of different reasons these days, God still comes through in unique, powerful, and often unexpected ways, just like this little Facebook Live event that we share. Good evening also to Irene. So fun to see you earlier today. You were looking well. Looks like God has been good to you so far in the new year. My blessings to all of you in the new year. I was talking briefly about Pastor Joel starting at Eastside. If you did not get a chance to watch last week's episode or installment or whatever it is that we're calling these Together in Faith, we had an in-person interview with him from two different places. One, I was surprised that we figured out the technology to do that, but two, it was good conversation, so I invite you to go back and participate and watch that again if you didn't get it, so you can find out a little bit about who he is, and so you can think of ways to welcome him to this community here at Eastside. Again, his ordination will be on Saturday at 2, and you are all invited to be a part of the live stream for that event, as it will be taking place in Minnesota. Hi to Karen also, as she says good evening to all of us. You will notice I have my clergy garb on tonight. I don't always have a clergy shirt on Tuesday, but I had a special opportunity just a few minutes ago, actually, to give the invocation at our Sioux Falls City Council meeting. They invite area clergy to come in and start their meetings off in prayer. And so I was honored to be a part of that and to pray for our city leaders and for the people of this community. And I'll get the opportunity to do that again later in the year as we get into December. But one, it's nice that they start their meetings with prayer. I think that is pretty cool. And Mayor Tenhaken could not have been nicer to me as we were visiting prior to the start of that meeting. But in that conversation, and him not being a member here at Eastside, was asking where I was from, and I explained I'm from Eastside Lutheran Church, just up the hill on 10th Street, not far at all, corner of Cliff and 10th. The big church by Lewis. He goes, oh yeah, I know, the church that was struck by lightning. And I went, well, yep, that's us. It's amazing how many times that when I have been in conversation with somebody, what they think of is when I tell them where I am serving is, oh yeah, the church that was struck by lightning. Now that was like 20 years ago, if not more. So it's not a recent occurrence, but it was such a powerful event for people that's what sticks in their mind. And so since that brief conversation, less than an hour ago or about an hour ago, I've had it in my head thinking, what's our new lightning strike at Eastside? So for those of you who are Eastside Lutheran Church members out there, I invite you to think of that too. What's that thing that we here at Eastside can be known for that's just as powerful as a lightning strike, but that might have more ministry and mission emphasis to it? What's our new lightning strike? So let your wheels start turning in your head. And I'm glad that people recognize us, who we are. We do sit right up high on a hill here in a very central part of town. But as we are the people of God living out our mission, what can be that new lightning strike that people go, oh yeah, you're from Eastside, you're the church that, and then you fill in the blank. Anyway, that is a whole lot of adiaphora, stuff that we were not necessarily going to be talking about tonight, but it just came up as I was giving the invocation at the city council meeting. But moving on to the matters at hand, we are gathered for our conversation of Together in Faith. And if you're having trouble reading that fine print there down below, we are looking tonight at Islam. We are continuing this conversation of looking at other denominations and other world religions so that we can learn a little bit about who they are so that we can then grow in our own understanding of who we are, as most of us, Lutheran Christians. And so it's not a chance to praise or to bash any of these other groups that we are looking at, but simply to understand them a little bit more. Some of them may be understanding things for the first time and getting some insight, especially when we're talking about other world religions. And tonight, as we do this, we are going to be looking at the faith, not the fanatics. When you have a topic like Islam, often culturally that brings to mind all kinds of other images for people, and most of them are related to some kind of politic and some kind of other things. The world of terrorism that we have been living in the last couple of decades has not helped that. But tonight we are not looking at those kinds of things. We're trying to understand Islam simply as a practice of faith. And so if you saw the post on Facebook and wanted to be here tonight to bash all of those terrible terrorists, this is not the place where you will find that happening. We are looking at the faith. Now, why would we be looking at Islam? One, because it's just interesting, and two, because there's a growing Islamic population in the city of Sioux Falls. It's thought that there are somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 people who practice the faith of Islam right here in Sioux Falls. Certainly many of them are in our schools with our kids. And so it's important that we have a little bit more depth of knowledge just about who they are so that we can understand them. So we will be running through a few facts as we go through all of this. First, Islam is an Arabic word meaning surrender, submission, commitment, and peace. All of this then in relation to the divine will of God. So that's what the word Islam means. It's kind of giving yourself to the will of God. And one who follows the faith of Islam is referred to as a Muslim. Now, as of 2015 Pew Research, Islam is the world's second largest religion, with right around 1.8 billion followers. Now, of course, that's probably a little higher, being 6 years later. But it's the second largest world religion, right next to Christianity, that comes in at about 2.3 billion. I put Judaism on there, and you'll see why in just a minute. But that, again, is a much smaller religion, and that was one of the last world religions that we were talking about a little bit, and it's 0.01 billion. So much, much smaller group of people, even though we probably hear as Christians more about Judaism than we do about Islam. Yet they are all connected in some way. Islam can be found in at least 40 countries around the globe. Indonesia is where the largest concentration is, if you will, of people who follow Islam. And then that is next with Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. So you see it's kind of a Near East, Far East kind of population center. But it's also interesting to note that in the United States, Islam is our fastest growing religion. And we have had Islam in the United States since the first slaves were brought over as our country was being formed and founded, but then especially again also in the early 1900s as there was a migration movement. But regardless, today it's the fastest growing religion in the U.S. The Muslim objective is to live for the pleasure of Allah who created humankind, and to serve Him only, and to reach the ultimate goal of paradise in the world to come. So that would be what is kind of at the heart of the people who follow Islam. To live for the pleasure of Allah, that is God. And God is one who created humankind, to serve Him and Him only, and to reach then that ultimate goal of paradise in the world to come. Now, before we jump into this next segment, I want to say a little bit of highs to Holly, as well as to Reese, as she is up there, as well as to Mom and Dad, as they are out there. All right. Now, Islam is an Abrahamic faith. Now, what I mean when I say an Abrahamic faith, it's one of the religions that traces its origins back to the descendants of Abraham. And the three big Abrahamic faiths would be, of course, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The second son of Abraham, Jacob, is where we end up getting Judaism and then Christianity out of Judaism. But it would be Abraham's oldest son, Ishmael, where we get Islam. I'm going to throw up a couple of symbols here. We have these symbols for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Now, there are other Abrahamic faiths. Baha'i and Druze and some of these others also are Abrahamic faiths, but they just don't have the population density as Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Those three symbols, I think, are pretty recognizable to many as the symbol of their religion. We have the Star of David, or sometimes called the Shield of David. It's interesting, that's the symbol for modern Judaism, but it's not something that has been associated with Judaism for years and years. It kind of came around in the 18th century or so. But that symbol was also found in Muslim mosques hundreds of years before that. So it's not a solely Jewish symbol, but in today's world, it's become associated with Judaism, and you will find it in synagogues and whatnot. Then, of course, there is the cross, which would be for Christianity, where Jesus was crucified, died, and then later raised. And then the star and the crescent which is the symbol or has become a symbol for Islam, though it is also used in many other places. And it's really kind of a symbol of the Ottoman Empire is where that symbol comes through. But if you see that somewhere, it kind of gives you an idea as to what's going on. Now, I thought it would be nice to take a little bit of a quiz as we are gathered here, as we are thinking about these three major Abrahamic faiths, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. And I found online where there was a quiz, and it said for first graders. So I don't know what your feelings are. Are you smarter than a first grader? Now, some of these questions I don't know that first graders know, but we'll see. I'm going to throw out three leaders: Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. Of those three leaders, which one was the leader of Judaism? Moses, okay? With the Torah and all of those early books of the Bible and kind of setting forth the law, the Ten Commandments. Then who was the leader of Christianity? Jesus, of course. This is not the trick question. It's the squirrel. And then who's the leader of Islam? The Prophet Muhammad. So that is the leader who becomes associated with Islam. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. But then here comes the bitter parts of the quiz, okay? And I don't think any of these are super hard, but your choices will be one of three: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Are you ready? Are you smarter than a first grader? This religion is the oldest of the three. Judaism. Judaism would be the oldest. Christianity came about, not quite 2,000 years later. Judaism then kind of strange, Hebrew Israelite, but regardless. And then later in the 6th and 7th century really is when Islam comes about. All right, the people of this religion go to a mosque to worship Allah, which is how you say God in the Arabic language. Islam, of course, yes. The holy book of this religion is the Bible. Christianity, the holy book for Islam would be the Quran, and for Judaism, you would have what we call the Hebrew Scriptures. Okay, the people who follow this religion are called Muslims. Islam. The Star of David is an important symbol in this religion. Judaism, if you were paying attention just a second ago, you knew that. Easter and Christmas are important holidays in this religion. Christianity, of course. People of this religion believe that Jesus is the Son of God. That makes us uniquely Christians to believe that Jesus is the Christ or the Messiah. Praying 5 times a day is one of the duties of followers of this religion. Islam, we'll talk about that in a second. The followers of this religion are called Jewish people. Tough one, Judaism. The people of this religion go to a church to worship God. Christianity. A rabbi is a leader in this religion. Judaism. People of this religion believe the greatest of all the prophets was Muhammad. Islam. All right, I'm guessing that, our first grade test we hopefully all passed. Just a little bit of tips and insights. Question for you then. Do you have any Muslim friends, people who follow the religion of Islam? Depending on where you live, you probably do. I know that I do. I don't have a ton, but even in Sioux Falls, I have friends who are Muslim. So with that in mind, let's think about how we can then better understand them and how they approach the world. Islam is a monotheistic faith. Now that's just kind of a big word that means one God. If you break off the first 4 letters, you have mono being one, and then theistic about God. So it's a one God faith. Judaism is monotheistic, and Christianity, even though we have the Trinity, we still believe in one God in 3 persons. So both Judaism, Christianity, as well as Islam would be monotheistic. Now, Islam is based on the teachings of Muhammad bin Abdullah Sah, prophet of Allah. Again, Allah is for God. You'll notice that when you see it typed here on these little slides, it's always in capital letters. That is a practice of Islam to give special reverence to God. And Muhammad, and it can be spelled a couple of different ways. I happen to be using the Mohammed version here in these tonight. Was a prophet who lived in 570 to 632 AD, and he received his first revelation from Allah when he was 40 years old. The name Muhammad you will often see printed followed by Sah, which is an Arabic abbreviation for a long sentence that I will not try to pronounce to you, but that means, may Allah's peace and blessings be upon him. And so it is used following his name again as a sign of reverence. Over the 23 years, Allah's revelations to Muhammad back in the early 600s would then be recited to his followers, who would then memorize every single word that he was saying through these revelations and would then write them down. And over the course of that time period, those revelations of God through the angel Gabriel to Muhammad would be collected together to form the Quran, which would be their holy book. And it talks about what's lawful, what's unlawful. It talks about rewards and punishments and how to go about living your lives and criteria for justice and all of those kinds of things about what does it mean to live as a person of faith who's following the will of God. So that's kind of where they get their teachings and how they're collected and where they are at. People who follow the way of Islam understand it to not just be a religion that they practice or something that they do on the weekends, but following Islam is a way of life, that everything you do is nuanced because of your practice of this faith, which I think many people would say about their own faith. Hopefully, we certainly think about that as we live our lives as Christians. Muslims implement the pillars of Islam in their daily life as they go about living that way. And those 5 pillars are faith. That would be faith in Allah alone and in his prophet Muhammad. And then prayer. And there are 5 times a day when they have to pray. They're obligatory, and so there's no getting around it. If you are going to be a follower of Islam, there are 5 times a day when you have to pray. Now, you can pray other times as well, but those are the 5 times. Charity is also a practice, one of the 5 pillars, and it would be once I think your necessities are taken care of, that 2.5% of your income then goes to the people who are poor and in need. So it's kind of right in that if you're going to be a follower of Islam, you're going to be giving your money to people in need. Kind of a distribution of wealth, so to speak. And then fasting is another principle, and that takes place during Ramadan, which is the 9th month of their lunar calendar. I think coming up this year, Ramadan will be in April, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And then the last one, pilgrimage, and that is pilgrimage to Mecca. Mecca is a city just off the east coast of the Red Sea in Saudi Arabia. And so once in your lifetime, if you are able to do so, you are expected to make pilgrimage to Mecca. Mecca is a city of roughly 1.5 million people. So those are the 5 pillars of Islam. They hold, as far as their worship goes, a congregation kind of like prayer service on Friday evenings or on Fridays. And it will happen in a mosque or other designated places like that, depending on what's available where people are living. But even though that happens, there's not like a special designated day when all of the Islam followers are supposed to worship. Like we have kind of Sunday, which has become a tradition in Christianity, Sabbath, of course, in Judaism. The 5 obligatory prayers, as well as the voluntary ones, kind of help make every day a day of worship when you are following Islam. Islam, I think, is often confused with the culture that it is in. And being a religion that is so largely dominant in the Near East and Far East and East Asia, it takes on a lot of those things that we think of here as Western Americans, sometimes as being more foreign and as a part of what they're doing, as a part of their religion, when really those things are more a custom of the culture out of which those people are living and don't necessarily define who they are. Just like there are many things that happen by Christians who some people might question, but that are not so much a part of the Christian faith as they are customs of the cultures and where you find that particular version of Christianity. Life on earth is temporary and a trial and a test. And I think this is interesting as I was finding this. And again, a lot of the stuff that I use for this Together in Faith comes from the book Together in Faith through Augsburg Fortress that looks at these different religions and denominations. And while I am certainly no expert, it's interesting to look at this. And if life on earth is temporary and kind of a trial run, if the good that you do in your life outweighs the bad, then you make your way to paradise. But if the bad that you do and say and act out in this world outweighs the good, well, then you suffer the wrath of hell. And as I was looking at that, I think there are many Christians who incorrectly understand Christianity to be like that. Well, Christianity is about being good and making sure I don't break the 10 Commandments. But that's not necessarily what we understand as Christians. We understand as Christians that we are a sinful people who do these things, and at times the bad does outweigh the good. But we have a God who loves us and comes to us with a person of Jesus Christ who was died and raised that we might know forgiveness. But that's not the understanding that we have in Islam. Like Christianity, they believe that God created all, and beginning with Adam and Eve. But unlike Christianity, they believe that everyone is born without sin. You will remember Luther talking a lot about being born a sinner. Not the understanding of Islam, and that people can then choose either to go on to paradise or to hell, depending on their words and actions that they put into practice in this life. Another belief is that Jesus was created by God. This is kind of the understanding, the Islamic understanding of who this person Jesus is. That he was created just like Adam and Eve were created. That he was sent then to be the Messiah for Israel. And that he was a prophet and not divine, not God. They wouldn't see him as a part of the Trinity. And they don't believe that he was either crucified or raised, but that he will return in the last days when God comes for that final judgment, if you will. A few other customs. Marriage is very important for people who follow the Islamic faith. I have in parentheses here, marriage is half of religion, which kind of comes down to the foundation of civilized society begins with family. Family is very, very important in our Muslim families, if you've had a chance to get to know them. Also, they are commanded to dress modestly so that they don't reveal their physical aspects to others, often keeping people from temptation, so to speak. Women would be expected to cover their hair because it is the crown of their beauty. And depending on the culture where you find Islam, some of them also will cover their face, though that's not something mandated by the Quran. It's more of a cultural tradition. But I think that's often where people see Islam, and that's the first thing that comes to mind is women running around in burqas and covering up. Like Jews and Christians, they also have rules, so to speak, like the 10 Commandments that govern how they go about religion and living life. Muslims shall not worship any other deity. That's kind of the first one, just like our first commandment. I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. We are to Muslims would say they are to worship Allah and Allah alone. So, worship no other deity, do not murder, do not break contracts. I thought that was interesting, right in there. Do not break contracts. Don't break your word. Wish more people lived like that. Do not commit adultery, do not become intoxicated, do not gamble, lie, covet, steal, be homosexual, do not eat pork, do not cause fear or discomfort to others. That's also very interesting. Don't spy, don't slander, several other pieces like that. Again, lots of which just kind of ethical kinds of behavior. I can see as I'm looking at this that a lot of Islam is grounded in ethics. And then I wanted to share with you some terms. The term imam is given to a leader of an Islamic community. It could be any devout Muslim who leads the community in prayers. So their rabbi, their priest, their pastor is referred to as an imam. Then, of course, Ramadan, that would be the 9th month of the Islamic calendar. And it is a time in fasting, and it's practiced throughout that month where people then don't eat anything during the daylight hours. And that, of course, fasting is a part of many, many different religious traditions, including Christianity, and it helps us focus in a little bit more deeply on our faith and who we are called to be. Just a couple other terms. Jihad, we hear that on the news a lot, but I think it's sometimes misunderstood. A different spin gets put on it. In a very strictly religious perspective, it would be a challenge to achieve piety or submission or obedience to Allah. And this holy war interpretation gets a bit misleading. And then zakah, or the obligatory distribution of wealth. We touched on that already, about giving 2.5% of your wealth to the poor and to those who are in need. So that's kind of some trivia kinds of things, if you will, about them. Just a couple more. There are 2 holy days in their year, like we have Easter and Christmas that kind of jump to the center of Christianity. They have a Dul Fitr, which would be the end of Ramadan. So after you've been fasting for a month, can you imagine fasting for a month? Then you have this big feast. And then Idul Adha, the end of pilgrimage. And it also is reminiscent to Abraham's devotion. We remember the story in Genesis when God has him take Isaac up the hill and is getting ready to have him make him a sacrifice, but then provides the ram at the last minute, kind of recognizing Abraham's faith. Concerning racism, it was interesting. Muhammad Sah says this, that all humankind is from Adam and Eve. An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab. So that is an interesting perspective if you were to follow that, that they see people as people and all being created, if you will, in God's image, though that's a Christian terminology, but the concept roughly the same. For Islam, much of their identity comes from family, strong sense of community, and education is valued highly. So then, lots of stuff on what is kind of about the practice of Islam. But all of these conversations that we have so that we can then also think about and grow in our own understanding. Lots of the ethical kinds of stuff that comes through here, I think, are significant. But as I kind of learn and grow in my own understanding, it's evident, quite evident, that there's this lack of a personal relationship with God. When we have God known to us in Jesus who comes to be with us, there's this different feeling to our relationship with God. We have this Savior component that's missing, I think, in Islam, and that we choose to either go to paradise or to hell based on our actions. Well, thank goodness as Christians that's not our understanding, because I know that I would struggle to get in if it was left up to me. But God comes to us in ways that overcome that, and that comes through forgiveness, and that we are only made right with God through what God has done for us in Jesus. And certainly we want to live lives of faith and do all of these other things, but that's not what makes our salvation. It doesn't all depend on us in Christianity. and it's not all up to me. So we think about what is our nature and relationship with God, and what can we learn from deeper knowledge of the study of Islam. What would it mean for us to have regular times of prayer? Maybe you do already. Maybe you pray when you wake up for devotions. And then maybe you pray at breakfast. And then maybe there's a time in the afternoon where you do something. And then you pray again at supper and then before bed. In the monastery, they have 7 hours of prayer that are built into their day. How are those things that we can incorporate into our own life? How can we put emphasis on family and then other personal relationships and in community? How can we think about Islam, or like they do in Islam, about those relationships? But for them, that's not necessarily where the heart of that faith is. It becomes, what do I do and how does it turn about? Hopefully, as you think about what is your relationship, what is the nature of your relationship with God, it is one of a God who meets you where you are at and is not judging, but coming that you might know life and that you might know hope. As we gather on these beautiful Tuesday nights, we do not necessarily always know where everybody is at in their own walk of faith. But my prayer for each of these nights is that God might meet you in the midst of where you are at, that you might know that you are not alone on this walk, and that in the person of Jesus, we have hope in ways that the world cannot fathom. And so may that be the case for you. Please know that each of you are in my prayers, and I am so thankful that you are gathered here spending this time with me on Tuesday evenings. Quick shout outs to Marlis as well, and of course to Dorothy. Glad you guys were here. Let's do as we do on Tuesday nights. We gather, we take a pause, we take a breath, we put the day into focus, we think about what God might have in store for us tomorrow, and we trust that God will be with us tomorrow, no matter what it might be, so that we might not be anxious as we lay our heads on our pillows. And together we pray. I give thanks to you, my heavenly Father, through Jesus Christ, your dear Son, that you've graciously protected me today, and I ask you to forgive me all my sins where I've done wrong, and graciously protect me tonight. For into your hands I commend myself, my body, my soul, and all that is mine. Let your holy angel be with me, so that the wicked foe may have no power over me. Amen. May you have a non-anxious night and the assurance that God is with you. You are being prayed for. God bless you all.